Awesome. All right. Well, welcome everyone to the Collab Lab Tech Talk. Can y'all see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. So today we are lucky enough to be joined by Craig, who's going to be talking about unconscious bias and wise feedback. This talk is sponsored by the Collab Lab, and all of the talks are recorded and posted to YouTube. And so links to these will be made available on the meetup page, which we can see the link for right there. We do use live captions, which are available using Zoom's closed caption feature, and they are pretty awesome and also awesomely funny sometimes with the kinds of fun mistakes that they made. Do encourage everyone to please take a look at the Collab Lab Code of Conduct, which I'll go ahead and post in the chat in just a second. Yeah, and please, if you have any interest in the Collab Lab or want to know more about us, you can always reach out to myself or anyone in the Collab Lab. And we do it's a nonprofit organization. So if you have the luck to have some extra funds lying around, you can consider sponsoring us. It's a GitHub sponsor. And that is about it. So I will go ahead and stop sharing and leave it off to Craig.
Yay. Well, yay. Well, thanks so much, Mike. Or thanks so much. As I think I was just about to say. And I think somebody just came in. Welcome, Sully. Welcome, Sully. And welcome, Rebecca, Tom, Thomas, Tobias. Hope you all are doing well. Happy New Year, right? Happy New Year. Always a good time to, I think about the, I think it's the Roman, the Roman, what do you call it? God of Janus, right? Janus has those two faces. One looking forward, one looking back. At times like in January, we get to sort of reflect on the past and think about how we might want to be in the future. So it's like a turning point for us, right? A time for us to do those things that we wanted to do. I'm not even talking about like resolutions, that sort of crap, because I never do those. But just in terms of, it's a time where we're in transition, right? And we continue to be in transition with things like the global pandemic, and the like. So I want to thank you for your time to join us today. My name is Craig, and I'm going to start actually sharing my screen a little bit here. And yay, there we go. Y'all can see that, right? Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Mike. And so, I'm here. Was talking with some folks in the Collab Lab, and for some folks who were on the board, and I actually serve as an advisor to the Collab Lab board. I'm actually pals with Andrew Hedges, who is one of the co-founders of the Collab Lab. We've known each other for a very long time, and but anywho, I can tell you more about that in a second. This is me. This is some information about myself here. I'm coming to you from Richmond, California, but also in the auspices of my role as I think about myself as somebody who is an employee of San Jose State University. And in that spirit, what I really like to do when I do this type of work, or any of these types of presentations I do, is I like to do a quick acknowledgement of the land that San Jose State University in particular, and even extends to where I live here in Richmond. And while we may be gathering with the Collab Lab, where I'm gathering here in the East Bay and sometimes in the South Bay, I'm gathered on the ethnohistoric tribal territory of the Thaman Ohlone, who were direct ancestors of the lineages enrolled in the Muwekma Ohlone tribe, who were missionized into Mission Santa Clara, San Jose, and Dolores. The land on which San Jose State is established was and continues to be of significance to the Muwekma Ohlone tribe. We also recognize that the ancestors of the Muwekma Ohlone constructed and maintained 3 Bay Area missions. Our campus extends to surrounding areas that held a tupatak, a traditional roundhouse, which were once located at the historic Lope Niego land grant Ranchero Pozolome y Positas de las Animas, otherwise known as the Little Well of Souls. Also, Marchello, Pio, and Cristobal's land grant Rancho Ulistoc, which were places of celebration and religious ceremonies, as well as nearby ancestral heritage shell mounds that served as the tribe's traditional cemetery sites and traditional monuments. San Jose State University also desires to honor the military service of the Muwekma who have honorably served overseas during World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Iraq, and who are still serving in the United States Armed Forces today. And think about land acknowledgements and what compels me to do it, and what I also want to share is that what sort of compels me to action around my relationship and my work with Indigenous folks. And I have the opportunity and the great fortune to be connected to some folks from the Susquehanna Intertribal Council up in Napa County, where I continue to connect, be in kinship with, and publicly serve, doing community service and the like. So I think with land acknowledgements are a little bit, to trouble it just a little bit, that sometimes they seem empty for some. So, which is why I add that stuff at the end. A little bit about me. And I'm like totally not in tech, which is kind of funny that I'm connected here with the Collab lab. And although, in my office, I'm like the go-to tech guy, I guess. So maybe that's it, but nothing like what y'all are doing and what you all are learning. I serve as the Director for Social Justice Education in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, which is also part of our Office of the President at San Jose State. I've been doing social justice education now for over 20 years, maybe closer to 25. And I've sort of found this work through work in tertiary education or colleges and universities. So found in and out of what some folks call student affairs work. I know we sometimes call it DEI when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion as acronyms for that, or JEDI I've heard now, which I kind of like because I'm a Star Wars fan. So a number of the things that I do, I help people play nice. I do a lot of instruction on campus, and some of the research I've been interested in designing, facilitating, and researching social justice educational leadership and leadership educational interventions, sort of broadly defined. Have a little particular interest in looking at ally development and intergroup dialogue as a mode of social justice education as well. And since I troubled the land acknowledgement, I'll trouble this as well. And I think about some of the work of, I don't know, has anybody ever heard of Robin DiAngelo? Have you ever heard of that? Like the last couple of years, she's sort of gotten a little bit of notoriety in terms of somebody who's been doing a lot of writing and some consumable stuff about like what we as white people can do to show up as allies to folks of color, to work on ourselves and to do work to help eliminate, work towards the end of racism, right? She talks about one of these moves that white people make, that is credentialing, which is essentially what I'm doing right now, right? So anyway, so if you'll pardon my credentialing as we go forward. Oh, right on, Thomas. I'm seeing what you're saying is familiar with land acknowledgements. Right on. And if I meant to put this in the chat too, if you are a little bit curious about land acknowledgements, also dump these 2 links in the chat. 2 different, learn more about land acknowledgements. I have actually put this website together at San Jose State, as well as some information. You could like interactive map, find out whose land you're on, what type of unceded land are you sitting on as we speak? Okay, cool. Back here. All right, here's what I got. Here's my intentions for tonight. I fully acknowledge that folks who have probably done some work around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and maybe we're continuing to explore and develop some self-awareness about how we show up for ourselves, how we show up in the spaces that we're in, maybe in our workspaces, how we develop sort of an awareness, not just of ourselves, but of others. I want to explore a little bit around sense of belonging, what that means as we talk about stuff like inclusion. Want to review a little bit of content regarding DEI around identity and social inequality, bias and stereotype threats. Hopefully that will help us think about our own context in which we work. So that's where I'm going tonight. I hope so buckle up because I usually do these things. I usually never agree to do a 1 hour thing because, there's a lot to get to. And sometimes you can't always do it in a bulleted list when we sometimes talk about topics like bias, social oppression, social inequality, racism, sexism, heterosexism, homophobia, and the like. So I'll take a few shortcuts because we only got an hour, but I hope hopefully it will work for everyone. So, okay. So, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion is a phrase that's kind of, it's kind of popular right now. And, we've had different types of phrases of the type of work that we now consider DEI. That some people would connect to human resources work or this had lots of names over the years in where I work in education, like multicultural affairs. That's my dog Tessa. In the background, she may make an appearance. Another buzzword as we think about, or buzz phrase as we think about this type of work when we're attending to the ways in which that we interact in a context around social inequality or social oppression more specifically, right? And I also like this mantra that I actually got from a colleague of mine. When we think about diversity, diversity is our reality, equity is our goal, and inclusion is our practice, right? So we throw these words around. So if you didn't know this already, diversity is a reality, right? So it's trite when I would say maybe, when you're in your workspaces or in your Zooms, people have their cameras on, you might be able to see some type of characteristics that express different types of human diversity, right? We know that from demographics. We know that that particularly in the United States context, that our nation is becoming more and more diverse around a variety of social group memberships, right? Equity is what we hope to provide in the context of our work, right? So, regardless of people's identities or their backgrounds, that, whatever interest, if you're in tech, some of the things that you're doing, that people are able to get to do what they want to do in tech, or the products that we make in tech, that people are able to get access to those different things without the impediments of the stuff when we talk about things like isms, like racism, sexism, classism, heterosexism, homophobia, those types of things that might get in the way, right? That we have the ability to reach our full potential without the impediment of those isms, those things, right? And when I think about inclusion is a practice where we get to some of that. This is our practice to be able to get to that goal of equity, right? So diversity is our reality, equity is our goal, and inclusion is our practice. Well, so what? Why do we care about, why might we care about this stuff? This diversity, all this stuff has gotten attention. Oh, geez, when we think about pandemics and the one that we're in, some folks have also referred to the ongoing pandemic of structural racism as we think about that. We could drill down into other isms, and certainly a lot more salience in the past year and a half with the the vigilante murders of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and so many others that brought us or re-reminded us of the pandemics that we've been in around, particularly in the United States context around race and racism. But so what, why do we care about this diversity, equity, inclusion stuff? Well, the thing is that particularly in college and universities, we've been doing lots of research about, why diversity matters, right? Well, and one of the big things we like to say is that diversity makes you smarter, right? So, and here's a incomplete list of different types of things that we can identify through research that have to do with the ways in which that diversity makes us smart. This research is done in a higher ed context, but if you think about it, a lot of the stuff is applicable in outside of higher ed as well. When we are in groups, when we have contact across difference, that a number of these things we know, particularly in college and universities, that these happen. So active thinking is a big deal, right? Our intellectual engagement, perspective taking is one that is something that we get perhaps when we are in context in higher ed that we take into the working world, right? Social self-concept is certainly important after our time in college. We know about citizen engagement and involvement in the community when we have studies that talk about the ways in which that when we are in diverse contexts, that we are more interested, there's more interest in being involved in our communities, right? Citizen engagement might even look like stuff like voting, for example, right? Being to care about what's going on in our communities. Involvement in our communities, we might be more interested in, being involved in, faith groups, and community groups, and community advocacy and the like. So, diversity, all this stuff makes us smarter. It drives innovation, and in fact, I want to talk about that in terms of tech as well. So there's some research done by some folks at the University of Michigan around these people, Page and Fortune. Somebody just dropped something in the diversity bonus knowledge, compelling interest. Oh yeah, that last set of research. Who just dropped that? Sally. That last set of research actually was a part of the compelling interests, specifically that had to do with the University of Michigan Supreme Court cases. And they use that phrase, that phrase exactly, compelling interest. What's the compelling interests, right? So, getting back to about tech, we think about there are a number of organizations that are spending gobs of money on DEI stuff. And the very diversity in which we invest dollars in careers does not necessarily lead to cognitive complexity, right? Because we need to do something, because we need to do more than training, because people from different ethnic or cultural backgrounds may require the same training, skill sets, and experiences as people in the prevailing culture, right? So in that case, they'll likely think about things in the same way, and the deeper differences disappear. What do I mean by that? So the type of training that we might do, we might be training folks on the old stuff, where those differences that people might bring to an organization might fall away, because if we're teaching people concepts in the different organizations that we work in, that might take away or strip away some of those things that people might even be bringing. Remember having a conversation with this guy I used to work with. I said, wouldn't it be great if we could bring our full selves, to our workplaces? And this guy was like, I'm not sure I want to bring my full self to my workplace. Because I think it was part of that is he didn't feel like he necessarily was included in that workplace, right? So anywho, diversity leads to innovation, responsive, and agile solutions, right? So the life and worldviews and perspectives of people from different, particularly from people from different racial and ethnic groups, leads to more consistently innovative, responsive, and agile solutions in industry, right? So diversity is our goal, diversity is our reality, equity is our goal, inclusion is our practice. So I am curious for everybody here, think about the places you've worked, or the places you work currently, or the spaces you're in. Maybe you're in school, maybe you're in different types of community groups, or what does it mean to feel like you belong, and what are the things that happen that make you feel like you belong, right? You know, I was going to do this on Poll Everywhere, but we have so few people. Why don't I just invite folks to share stuff in the chat box? You know, I was going to do that, but let's just keep it, you know, what does it mean to feel like you belong? Or what are those specific things that you can say, oh yeah, that makes me feel like I'm included, or that makes me feel like I belong in a particular group or organization? Feel free to put some of those things in the chat now. What do you think? What are some of those things that make you feel like you belong at a particular company, an organization, maybe a faith group, maybe a community organization? Go ahead and put those things that make you feel like you are included or you belong in that chat box. Yeah, right on. Yeah, thank you, Sally. People who, yeah, that your identity is recognized and your voice is heard. Absolutely, that you're seen, right? My opinions are respected, encouraged, and welcome. Yeah, keep them coming if you got more. I know we're only like a few people, so no pressure. Anything else? All about meritocracy. Okay, it's about meritocracy. Say more about what you mean by meritocracy. Your talents are leveraged, sure. Yeah, okay. All right, well, let's keep going then. Let's keep going here then. So we're not going to do that, but I want to talk a little bit, you know, we've done some work at, yeah, you're integrated into groups. The work we do is not about who you are and what you've done before, but what you can produce. Right, yeah, I picked up what you put down. Right. And, you know, I also wonder about if people even have opportunities to produce, right? If they don't feel like they belong into a group. So that might be another dynamic, a different perspective as well. So I want to talk about a couple of ideas here about, you know, we sometimes talk about climate and we talk about a sense of belonging when we're talking about stuff around inclusion, right? So climate has to do with sort of the current attitudes and behaviors of all the people that work in an organization or in a particular community, right? It has to do with, you know, it might even have to do with policies and procedures which influence a level of respect that people have for individuals, individual needs, abilities, and their potential as well, as some of you put in some of these examples. You know, sense of belonging, when we talk about that, or at least how it shows up in some of the literature, right, has to do with like feeling of connection and identification, or the flip side, isolation or alienation with whatever community they're a part of, right? Whether that be a workplace or a larger community. A lot of these things I'm coming from, you know, have to do with some of the ways I'm talking about this I'm extrapolating from how we study this stuff in college and universities and tertiary education. So feelings of connection and identification, or the flip side, isolation and alienation within their community, right? So the flip side of inclusion is exclusion, right? And so let me ask you this. Let me just ask you this. You can give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Would you say in the year 2022 that there are some of us who get treated like at an advantage and some of us who get treated at a disadvantage based on some of our social group membership, some of the more specific aspects of our identity? Would you say that that is something that happens in the year 2022? Give me thumbs up or a thumbs down or something in the chat box. Yeah, right on. So depending on who we are, depending on the different types of identities we might hold, that we might get treated at an advantage in our society and maybe treated at disadvantage in our society. It might be at individual levels, right? The way that people might interact with us on a one-to-one basis. It might have to do like with cultural stuff. That's what I was talking about earlier about like when people go into organizations and they might learn some stuff about a particular organization that sort of wipes away some of the individualistic stuff that people might be able to bring and contribute to an organization, right? Some people might even think about that in the ways in which, like, cultures of white supremacy culture as a way in which that, the way in which is a specific example around racism about policies and procedures and the ways in which we do things that might keep folks of color at disadvantages, right? Even when we're not even thinking about it. That it's ingrained in the systems or in the policies of an organization, right? Might have to do with institutional policies and the ways in which those different sort of types of institutions connect with each other to create systemic sort of versions of exclusion as it relates to different social identity groups, right? This is where, like, I want to spend a lot more time on this, but I only know we got an hour, so we're going to keep going. I think about people like my friend Dawn, who writes about this idea of sense of belonging, feeling of connection and identification, or isolation and alienation within their workspace, within their college or university campus, within their community, within their faith group, right? So think about the different circles of groups that you may be a part of, this sense of belonging, this feeling of connection and of identification. So one of the ways that that might show up is in bias, and I'm going to talk about a number of different aspects of bias, how it might show up. So here's what I got. The way I want to do that is I'm going to read a story, right? Okay, and I'm going to read the story twice. I'm going to ask you about it afterwards. Got it? This is like participant interaction time, right? Just so you know, if you're like, cooking in the background, or if you're like, raking the leaves or something, I don't know, you might want to, yeah. Okay, so here's a story. Ready? Pat, Chris, and Ty were going down an unpaved road. Across a flowery field, they saw a yellow house with a broken window. There was a baseball on the ground surrounded by broken glass. A man and woman were yelling. A child was crying. Punto. That's the story. That's it. All right. I'm going to read it one more time. So Pat, Chris, and Ty were going down an unpaved road. Across a flowery field, they saw a yellow house with a broken window. There was a baseball on the ground surrounded by broken glass. A man and woman were yelling. A child was crying. Got it? Okay. So here's the deal. True, false, or need more information. So I'm going to put a question up on the, up on the screen here, and you can give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or what other icon could we use? Maybe a smiley face for need more information. Make sense? Thumbs up, thumbs down, and or smiley face for I need more information. Right? We got the smiley faces here, or that one. I like that better, Tobias. That mouth wide open one, like what? Right? So that might be all right. You got it. All right, cool. Thanks, Tobias. So let's do that one. Everybody knows where to find those, right? At the bottom of the thing. You're all in tech. You all know what's up with how to work these wacky things. Okay. 3 boys were driving. Give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, or a what face if you need more information. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay, we got a what from Rebecca, Tobias. Okay. And Thomas, Sally, thumbs down. Okay. Thomas working. Okay. So, notice as I go through this list where our responses are, right? Okay. So here's the next one. They were going down an unpaved road. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or something else. They were going down an unpaved road. Okay. Notice how different folks have different responses as we're going to go forward. Tobias, anyone want to weigh in on that, Tobias? All right, moving on. We're moving on. Okay. There were yellow flowers in a field. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or some other face icon. Okay, we got thumbs ups, we got thumbs downs, we got a face icon for need more information. Sally saying thumbs down. Okay, got it. The house had a broken window. Thumbs up. Thumbs up. So on this one, some thumbs up on this one. All right. Peer pressure, Rebecca. Okay, right on. We got it. Gotcha. All right. How about a baseball broke the window? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay. Need more information, I guess. Got it. Want to chime in, Rebecca, before I go on? All right, we're clearing. All right, that's cool. All right, okay, it's unanimous. We all need information. A couple was arguing. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Don't know. A couple was arguing. 2 people say yes, 3 people say need more information, right? A child was scared. Need more information. Thumbs up. On the Tobias says thumbs up. Okay, need more information. Okay, so right on. So see, I almost did it there. Almost went ahead and I didn't want to. But here's the story that I just read to you twice. Okay, I'm not keeping score. You might be keeping score at home about this. So Pat, Chris, and Ty were going down an unpaved road. Across a flowery field, they saw a yellow house with a broken window. There was a baseball on the ground. Who won? Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Mike. I wasn't keeping score. So anyway, there was a there was a baseball on the grass surrounded by broken glass. A man and woman were yelling. A child was crying. So if you're competitive, you know what you did, right? So there you have it. So I want to say a few things about what we just did, right? So what were some assumptions that maybe you might have had about this story, right? You can put it in the chat box, or if you want to unmute and talk, or if you even want to turn on your video, you're welcome to do that. So what were some assumptions we might have made when we heard that story? Okay. Any in particular, Thomas? Or anybody? A man and a woman were a couple with a kid. Sure. Man and woman, I assume they were a couple. Yeah. Right on. Totally. I did that, I think, the first time I heard the story, right? What about like the gender of Pat, Chris, and Ty? Did you assume they were all guys? Right? Oh, the baseball broke the window, right? Sure. When there's a baseball sitting outside a broken window, we might have jumped to a connection between those two things, right? But yeah, so thank you for sharing that, Sally. Right, so you might have made some assumptions about a crying child, right? The child, children. Why do children cry? Sometimes they cry when they're too warm. Sometimes they cry when they're too hot. Sometimes they cry when they're hungry. So you're right. So there are lots of reasons, right? Mom and dad. Yeah. I assume it cries out of being scared, right? It might not be. There's lots of different reasons why a kid cries. How many people might have assumed that Pat, Chris, and Ty were driving, right? So you get the idea here. So here's a couple of takeaways. This is not like, I'm not intending this to be like, a gotcha game, or even, sorry, Mike, not even meant to be a competition. But some of the things I want to point out about this activity is that, listening is an essential skill when interacting across difference, right? So when we are, in a Zoom environment, we make all types of assumptions, right? When we're in a live environment, we might make all types of assumptions, using our looking balls, right? But not just with our ears, because we only use one mode of taking in information. When I read that story, it's just we were just listening, right? So and sometimes what we do when we have incomplete information, we sometimes put our own stuff on that information, right? We connect the broken ball with the window. We assume that the couple were a pair, right? You might have assumed that they were, say, going down a road. It might have been driving, right? There are all these different types of things that we make these connections. we do this, we fill in the blank regarding missing information. That's what particularly is problematic when we make assumptions based on the many characteristics that make up who we are: our race, our gender, our religious background, our sexual orientation, our social class, are amongst, those amongst other, right, characteristics. Yeah, assumption shortcuts. Yeah, based on previous experiences. Yep. Simplification of complex situations. Yeah, I had more slides on this I didn't share, but like we make these shortcuts, and it comes from these our reptilian brain. Like when we were cave people, when humans were cave people, right? We needed to make decisions on the spot in order to stay alive. We don't necessarily need to do that anymore, right? So we hear a bear or we hear a growl, we might be like, oh crap, I'm in trouble. I might need to fight, flight, freeze, go into those modes, right? Yeah, right on. So but it's sort of like leftover stuff when we think about this unconscious bias, right? So what else I want to say about this? We fill in blanks. Here's the other thing I believe, and maybe you believe this with me too. I sincerely believe that most of us, maybe not all of us, but most of us got up in the morning and said, oh yeah, I'm going to make sure that today I want to give people of color a hard time, or I want to make sure that if there's somebody who looks like they're Jewish, I'm going to give them, I'm going to do some anti-Semitic stuff, right? I mean, it's ridiculous to say it even like in that sort of way, but I believe that we don't do that, right? I think there's a disconnect in terms of sometimes around our intentions and the impacts of what we do. That sometimes we get into oh, somebody's coming into here we go. There's a disconnect there sometimes. So I want to say this because I believe that we are all on the same side of this issue of unconscious bias, right? We're on the same side where there are some people, maybe our former president of the United States was one of them, that might have gotten out of bed and said bad things, wanted to do bad things, but who knows? Maybe I'm totally wrong on that as well. But I don't believe that we in generally we wake up and say, yeah, I want to do that. But it's this unintentional stuff that trips us up, right? And sometimes it shows up in the way of priming. So again, when we talk about bias, there are lots of different things. I'm going to talk about a number of these different sort of ideas of things. Am I sharing my screen right now? I'm not sharing my screen right now. I want to share my screen. I'm going to do that again. Please hold. Thanks, Thomas. So here we go, priming, right? So for example, what this business about priming is maybe one example of how priming works. Like, for example, maybe if I were to tell you to think of a genius, you might think of a man, and you might even specifically think of this man, Albert Einstein, right? How many people did that happen for them when I said think of a genius? Show of hands, right? Nope, not for you, Thomas. Okay. Not you. Okay, right on. Might be for some other people as well, right? That, some of these we're priming when the idea of the prime is when I say think of a genius, there might be something that is, a part of that's sitting back there. We make a connection. Not that unlike the baseball and the broken window, right? Comes from this the compilation of the compendium of experiences that we've had and what we assess or what we assign with intelligence or what geniusness is. Maybe I just made up a word. Maybe I just butchered a word. But anyway, so here's another way we can think about priming. Okay, I'm going to show a video. All right, show the video.
This is an awareness test.
Y'all could hear that, right?
How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Go!
So, and, just to prove this thing right here, I'm going to stop this real quick, hit pause. I've had some students say, no way. They just added that in. I'm going to do it physically. I'm going to backward, make this thing go back, and you'll see the first time that moonwalking bear was there. Okay. So just,
Go!
just so you know, it wasn't done in post edit, right? There it is. Okay, so maybe you believe me now. All right. So, so hopefully, maybe get this idea here of what we're talking about with priming, right? We're drawn to attention to look at the something else, and we might miss some of the larger piece. One of the tough things about being in Zoom land, I wish I could have saw your faces when they did the moonwalking bear the second time. But I saw Mike smile though. So Mike, have you seen this before? No, you haven't seen this before. Okay, right on. Yeah, wild, right, Franco? Welcome, by the way, Franco. Glad you could join us. So some examples of priming that, as we think about like some of these primes that we connect with different social identity groups, right? Or even qualities that we might we use in a professional context, like even the word professional sometimes has a lot of connotations about expectations that, quite frankly, when I think about like whiteness or white supremacy culture sort of align with that, like, rugged individualistic sort of ways of being, different types of ways in which we prepare our hair, right? Right. So professional might be a lot of different things that we ascribe, right? And that might come up in a professional context. I've even, I've been on so many different search committees where we use this word fit, right? What the hell is fit, right, for an organization? And it's a way in which that sometimes we might not think about what sort of expectations that comes with fit. Maybe thinking about like different working groups or different projects you've been on. What is the idea of what prepared means, right? That might mean something. Or this person isn't ready for this level of work, right? So there are these sort of like these primes. We might not think of them as primes, but they connect with sort of latent discriminatory messages, right? So another way in which that some of this unconscious bias stuff sort of operates is, I want to share another example, this thing called the fundamental attribution error, right? And there's a lot of different things like the fundamental attribution error, lots of different types of bias, recency bias, lots of, what have you, the recency bias is the what have you done for me lately bias, right? You might have heard of that, but there are lots of different types of bias, right? I want to talk about one about this fundamental attribution error. And it's the way in which that we attribute stuff about the cause or success or goodness and failure and badness, right? So what I mean by this, sometimes when we talk about ourselves, right, we might think about like, ascribe goodness, not so bad, right? And we might say that we might have a trait that maybe that's a good a trait we have. Maybe dexterity is a trait that we have, right? And then when we might, look at, if there was things that might be a shortcoming for us, we might some of those things that might be shortcoming, we might attribute to being sort of a situational thing, right? So maybe let me just finish this example, and I'll give you the context, and I'll give you the example. So and then when we think about maybe other folks, people who are not like us, or people who aren't us, right? We might ascribe good things to a situation, and not necessarily, and bad things we might attribute to a trait. Let me give you an example of this, right? So let's say, I've got a brother, right? And my brother is kind of a knucklehead, right? So, in my house growing up, we had this vase. My mom had this vase and put it on a coffee table. And then, every once in a while, my brother would come around the corner and like knock over the vase. And I'd say, you know what, my brother, he's a friggin' klutz, he's a klutz, It's a trait that he has. He's a klutz. He like knocks stuff over, he's not paying attention, whatever else. But, you know, when I might do the same thing, I might say, oh, well, you know, there was this toy on the floor and I actually stepped over and I knocked over the vase. People picking up what I'm putting down here, people understanding this idea about a trait and situation, right? And we do this, and we sometimes do this in professional context or even school context, right? We might say, you know, students who are first generation students who, you know, might have lower levels of income. We say, oh, well, they're not prepared, you know, to come to school and do work. Or we might say, we might attribute somebody who comes into tech and be like, oh, well, you know, women really don't know tech, right? You know, that's a trait that we might be unconsciously ascribing to women when, you know, it could be just the opposite, right? So this thing is called the fundamental attribution error, right? But the problem with the fundamental attribution error is, you know, not only is it an error in terms of one-to-one stuff, but we sometimes do this, you know, in terms of groups. So we might, this pattern attributions again about the cause of success and goodness or failure and badness. So when we think about people who share our different identities or share our different, more specific identities to our social group membership, right? I might think about things that are good that are traits and bad things that happen in situations. And likewise, for groups that are different than us, we might ascribe, you know, when a student does good, you know, on a test, I might be like, oh, well, you know, that student really worked hard for that one test, but the rest of them, maybe not so much, right? We might ascribe it to a situation, right? Or bad things that happen as maybe a trait, because, you know, that student is lazy, right? So this is the way it's sort of, all this stuff sort of happens at unconscious levels. Okay. And it happens all the time. And who was it that was talking earlier about shortcuts? Tobias was talking about sort of these shortcuts. Like, this is sometimes where these shortcuts also show up. And the thing that's problematic about some of this bias is it leads to stereotypes, right? Which might lead to prejudice, which might lead to different forms of discrimination, and we don't know about it, and feeds into larger systems of social inequality. Oh my gosh, it's 10 of, I can't believe it's 10 of, and we're done in a few minutes. So I'm going to skip ahead to something real quick I want to talk about, and that is stereotype threat. So stereotype threat is it's sort of the other side of this bias, right? So being at risk of confirming as a self-characteristic and a negative stereotype about one's own social identity group membership, right? So, you know, what's a really dumb example? I'm a white dude. So like, you know, white guys can't jump, right? So I might be thinking about, oh, people are going to think I'm like, if I go and I play volleyball, people are going to think maybe I can't jump or something. I don't know, it's a bad example, right? But you know about the biases that might impact you, right? So here's the thing. Who do you think is vulnerable to stereotype threats? Go ahead and put it in the chat box. Anybody? Okay. Okay. Minorities. Okay. People from marginalized communities. Okay. Here. Shocker, everybody, right? Here is an incomplete list of different studies that were done on the topic of stereotype threat. Women in math, white people in regard to appearing racist, students from low socioeconomic backgrounds compared to students with high socioeconomic backgrounds, men compared with women on social sensitivity, right? Let me jump around. White people compared with Black and Chicanx, Latinx folks on tasks assumed to reflect natural people being natural at sports, right? So everybody is, right? Everybody is around these different stereotypes, the threat of stereotype. And I think what's important about talking about stereotype threat, naming it and being aware of it, is that we can like see it coming. We might be a little bit more ready for it when it does come, right? And it has a lot of stereotype threats have a number of different consequences, right? The stigmatized, threatened groups, you know, underperform on academic areas. I remember this one study that was done about women in math where they did an experiment where they said to one group of students, good luck on the test, and one group of students, good luck on this test, everybody. Women, I'm sure you're going to do great on this. And just by even saying that, we had like lower scores when we compared the averages amongst the different groups that were part of that, right? So when we note it, we're at risk of the stereotype threat happening, right? I'm not saying don't talk about identity, but I'm just talking about this in the context of stereotype threat, right? So it has all these different things that could show up. Increased use of self-defeating strategies, disengagement and disidentification, right? We talked about it's the opposite of belonging, right? The stuff that we talked about earlier that you wrote in the chat box earlier. Altered professional identities and aspirations. This is huge. Not only on college and university campuses, but in the context of people who are new at tech, right? Who are new to tech, like, hey, I want to be a programmer. Hey, I want to be whatever, right? And the stereotype threats, as they come up, they might discourage people from continuing on in their the profession that they want to be in. We only have a few minutes left. What I want to do maybe to end is like is a way to give feedback in the context of stereotype threat, right? So, all right, I want to talk a little bit about wise feedback. So people are doing some of this work on stereotype threat, in particular this guy, Claude Steele and his colleagues, talked about some ways in which that we can give feedback across difference that supplies a proactive and empowering explanation, right? So here's the way you can do it. So there's these 4 things. So real talk, right? So when you give your feedback description, describe the nature of the feedback being offered. Details matter. So what I mean by this is like, don't sugarcoat it. There have been recent studies about feedback in professional settings where white supervisors have give their supervisees of color very ambiguous feedback, leaving people to like, well, what am I getting the feedback on, right? So be specific, real talk. This job ain't easy, right? Talk about high standards. So emphasize and explain the high standards used to evaluate the work and generate instructional feedback, right? Edible feedback, feedback that people take and act on, right? You got this. Assurance of the person's ability. State explicitly that the person has the skills necessary to do whatever it is that you're doing, whether you're working on a project together or something like that, right? Or you're team leader, right? So use examples from prior interactions. I might say something like, hey, Sally, I know that you kicked ass in this other project when you did this, that, and the other thing, X, Y, and Z, specific detail, right? On that project. So I know you got it. I know you got this. I know you can do this piece that the team needs you to do. And say their name. What's funny about this last piece about saying their name, the research has shown that just by using somebody's name, that it increases the outcomes of people actually, moving on and doing what they're doing, right? So 4 things: real talk, this job ain't easy, you got this, and say their name. It's called wise feedback, right? What it does, this is what we're doing when we use those 4 things. We're increasing someone's sense of belonging, but the belief that the person who belongs in this organization or on this project is dependent on, and not just waiting to see if it's going to work out or not, right? And this is particularly a thing for students, first generation students in a college and university context, who college is new for them and their extended families, right? Low income, may not have had much experience in their family about how to work the system. Think about that in a tech context, right? People who are new to tech, right? That might not have those backgrounds. It increases engagement, with the leader, the lead or the lead of a project, or the leader or supervisor, right? So that, lowered effort on identity protection. If I'm not spending time trying to protect myself around my identity by maybe not self-disclosing, or maybe not sharing information, if I'm spending that time keeping my psychological armor up, right? I might be more trust and more engagement, right? And I'm more likely to integrate that feedback, right? And by using my name, you're amplifying the effects that this type of wise feedback has, right? So again, the wise feedback is real talk. This job ain't easy, and you got this. And when you're in the process of doing that, say their name, right? It amplifies the effect. What might this look like? Okay, so review the wise feedback might be like, review the attached work plan and my notes evaluating your recent submission of your PowerPoint presentation. This PowerPoint is an adequate, so that's the feedback description, right? This PowerPoint is an adequate starting point, but but can be better. Remember, the goal of this assignment is to create a presentation that showcases your communication skills to a potential client, right? Liliana, I know from examples of your work portfolio and contributions to the team discussion that you will be able to implement my suggestions and increase the quality and persuasiveness of your PowerPoint, right? All right, that's pretty cheesy because it's kind of like on, a slide, and I'm just reading it to you. If we had more time, this is what I wanted to do, but I used my time poorly. But this, we would have had you sort of role play this. So, if you want, what I can do here, this is gonna suck. All right, I'm just gonna dump this in the chat box again. If you want to write that down, this wise feedback, have it for yourself. Do real talk. This job ain't easy. Talk about high standards. You got this. I know you got this because I've seen you do it before. And I'm telling you, Franco, you got this. You can do this stuff, right? So that is the essence of what wise feedback is. So stereotype threat, how we can reduce it. There's a few things I'll wrap up with and we invite you to remember that you are a complex and multifaceted person beyond your multiple social identity groups, right? You are not just blank, right? Fill in the identity, but you're also, right? Something that's opposite of what the stereotype might be. Practice self-love. Projects and reports and working with others can be hard. You are totally able to do it. Use that wise feedback. Think about this as you work with other people that you mentor, other people that you lead in the context of your work, in your world in tech. Isms are real. Racism, sexism, classism, right? Social inequality around income or wealth when we're talking about classism. Ableism, right? White, what was I going to say? Anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim, right? All this stuff is real. Don't let people tell you otherwise, right? And emotions attached to some of that stuff is also totally friggin' normal. If it pisses you off, if it makes you sad, right? They do not prove the stereotype. That's something that I think is really important to know. And motivation and effort, this stuff about inherent motivation and effort matter, right? It's BS, it's bullshit about this sort of inherent talent or inherent genius, right? Don't let people tell you that either. So I am out of time. I can't friggin' believe it that it took that long, and I'm so sorry we didn't get a chance to do sort of that interactive thing. What I would love to invite you to do, if you would take about 5 minutes, the next 5 minutes after we wrap this up, is click on that, open up a tab on your browser, your favorite browser, and spend about 5 minutes and give me a little bit of feedback. That would be really helpful to let me know what you thought about this, what your experience was with this Collab Lab Tech Talk. So you'll see the link there in the in the chat box. And I want to thank you so much for your time. I'll stop sharing here. Thank you so much for your time. I don't want to keep anybody here any longer than you want to be. So if you got to go, that's cool. I'll hang around for a little bit. Link says it's expired. Oh, shit. All right. Don't worry about it. All right. Thank you for telling me that, Thomas. If you wait, like maybe in 10 minutes, I'll see what I did wrong on the stupid survey. You can get access to it again if it's busted. I'm sure I forgot to flick some switch somewhere.
If you figure it out, I can just put it in the comment in the meetup.
That'd be great.
So
that'd be great. It'll be the same link.
Shoot it over to me. Yeah.
It'll be the same link. I'm just a knucklehead and I probably didn't flip a switch somewhere. So so stay tuned for that. I'll fix it like 5 minutes after we say goodbye. All right.
Awesome. Well,
Thanks
thank you.
everybody for showing up.
Thank you so much, Craig. This was wonderful, and I will upload the recording to YouTube most likely tomorrow.
Right on.
So thank you so much, and as Craig said, anyone's welcome to hang out with him. Yeah.
But if you gotta go, smoke them if you got them. Do what you got to do.
I do have to roll.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks again. See ya. You should be co-host, so it won't close this.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'll chill for a minute.
All right. See ya.